let's go first to Natasha Piri, a political reporter. Natasha, a very good evening to you now. Who do you have on the floor with you?
Well, Griselda, actually, I was just about to rope in Umzandile, but before I rope him in, perhaps let me just speak to Mr. Narend Singh, I beg your pardon, of the IFP. Thank you so much for joining us at SABC News. So your numbers, you have increased, but are those the numbers that you actually wanted?
Oh, we would have wanted more. Thank you for having me, by the way. We would have wanted more, but I think in the circumstances that we were faced with, we are the only established party that managed to increase by 23%, and that was with an onslaught, a tsunami, a wave that just came, a freak wave, but we managed to withstand that wave. So in that respect, we are happy that we've increased our numbers, not only of representatives in the legislature and parliament, but generally our numbers improved.
And by that onslaught, do you mean the advent of the MK party?
Absolutely. I think we underestimated the MK party and how many people they would bring on board, to vote for them. But like I say, it's a tsunami. Tsunamis come and go.
Let's talk about the multi-party charter. I believe that a team has now been established that will take all the various political parties into negotiations.
Yeah, I think as far as the multi-party charter is concerned, they are going to be issuing statements which says that they were set up for a particular purpose, to bring the ANC's majority down, and they've achieved that. They thought,
but you can't single-handedly claim that as a multi-party charter.
I'm not saying that. It's due to many factors, but in some small measure they did that. But moving forward, I think they also realized that if they didn't get the majority, then each one would go their own way. And I think that's the kind of sense I'm getting from the partners, some of the partners in the multi-party charter.
Talk about some of the partners in the multi-party charter. Some are quite concerned and some are aggrieved. Some are feeling left out. And I was speaking to a particular person, and he believes, and he says rather, that the DA, the IFP and the FF Plus somewhat have some agreements.
I don't think it's an agreement, but there was an understanding, when the charter was drawn up, that we'll see what happens at the elections, and after that each one goes their own way. So there's no need for anybody to feel aggrieved. I think what those people should be feeling is that they should have done better, because if they did better, it would have boosted the chances of the MPC getting into government.
So as the IFP stands right now, will you continue with the MPC, or are other political parties coming to talk to you and approach you?
Well, we are talking to other parties. Other parties have approached us, and I think in the next few days we'll continue talking. By the way, we are going to be quite influential in Gauteng, even with our one seat in National Assembly and in KwaZulu-Natal. So we are in a bit of a fortunate position where people want to talk to us, but we'll be open to talk to anybody. At the end of the day, we want to see a government that's in place that meets the needs of the people of the country.
What are the non-negotiables for the IFP?
Well, some of the things, some of the parties, expropriation of land, without compensation is something that we don't agree with. Nationalizing the Reserve Bank is something we don't agree with. Getting rid of our constitution is something we don't agree with, and some parties are saying we should go back to a parliamentary democracy. Now, we won't agree with that kind of thing. And we believe in the rule of law. So the rule of law must prevail moving forward, irrespective of who is being prosecuted for whatever. But the rule of law is a very, very important cornerstone of our democracy.
I believe you saw the briefing by those 26 aggrieved political parties asking that the country actually goes to the polls again. Other political parties like the PAC have asked for a recount. As the IFP, where do you stand with this?
Okay, every party has a right to object in whatever way. We also lodged in a few objections, but we realized that those objections would not be material to results. And, if parties have objected, the IEC have a concomitant responsibility to respond to each of those objections. And us being here today at ROC and waiting for the result means that the IEC would have considered these objections. Now, whether they considered them satisfactorily, we don't know, but we are here for official results. And I suppose the court is, the next step for parties that feel totally aggrieved. But no party can come along and say, I can't come along as IFP and say, in KwaZulu-Natal, we projected 80%, we got 40%, now we want 80%. I mean, that's not how democracy works. So we just hope at the end of the day, good sense would prevail, and the people of South Africa would be winners out of any combination that's put forward.
And that scenario that you're actually painting is actually one of the objections, or one of the themes that were, objected to with the IEC. Let's just also talk about your objections. I mean, a lot of people have been complaining about, presiding officers. Some lacked knowledge. What is your general view as the IFP?
They're absolutely right. A number of the presiding officers lack knowledge. Some of the stations opened late. Many of the VMDs, they were not working. Some people came to vote. They were not given an opportunity because they were not on the VMD machine, but we found them on the voters' roll. There were those kinds of things, and I think the IEC really needs to get their act together, get out of the ivory towers, and really work on the ground with competent people to ensure that the people they employ are well trained. I believe they got 4 days of training, not enough. They are well trained to handle the kinds of queries that come through, but they also have to be well equipped. I mean, your VMDs have got to work. I mean, that's a sine qua non. They have to work. And presiding officers have to know the rules, because in many instances we know the rules better than presiding officers because we read the regulation, and that starts causing tension.
But were these issues raised and ventilated, with the IEC before you actually went to the polls?
Yes, we always interact with the IEC, and the one good thing about them, they come and meet political parties just to tell us what their preparation is like. We were relatively satisfied. We pointed out some of these things that could have gone wrong. They corrected some of it, but some things did go wrong. And, it causes a sense of irritation amongst not only political parties, but the voters themselves. They come to stations, they find the name is not there, or they're asked to go somewhere else, and they just leave. So we've got to look at that. We've got to look at education. We've got to look at the Section 24, how it works, because people didn't know that they couldn't.
I actually want to come to the issue of the Section 24A votes, and you're right, people didn't know. But one thing that's interesting, this was legislated, right, in Parliament. You as parliamentarians knew about it. Do you not take accountability for not educating the vote on the ground? A colleague of mine, Busi Chimombe, had actually asked one of these political leaders that as you're getting signatures from these parties and as you're holding your rallies, do you tell the voter that, listen, there are 3 ballots? Do you tell the voter that there's a Section 24A votes, that there's a special votes? Was there enough, voter education on the part of political parties?
Yes, we did, and I can assure you we did. But sometimes people hear you, but they don't listen to you, or vice versa. And they don't take note of things like that until they find themselves at the booth and they're not allowed to vote. But I think we must start now educating our people about this new system. We passed it because in past elections we found there were serious discrepancies where people from neighboring provinces were brought into provinces under the guise of Section 24. It happened. We saw it happen to us as IFP when we lost power in 2019. So I think it's a continuous process of educating the electorate, and the IEC has that primary responsibility.
Let's talk about voter turnout in this year's elections. It's over 50%. In 2019, it was 66%. What are these numbers telling you?
Disappointing. People are losing faith in the democratic system. They're losing faith in politicians. They're losing faith in government. And we need to do something to restore that faith, not as an individual political party, but as all political parties. People have got to realize the importance of going out and making your voice heard. And I think this is a wake-up call for them. They may have wanted better, but it's too late to cry. If you didn't participate, you are just as guilty for what went wrong or what went right.
Mr. Singh, thank you so much for your time. Of course, let me just relieve you so you can join in there. And of course, this as we count down, Criselda, to 6 o'clock, where the IEC will be then starting with their program. Criselda, I don't know if you will permit me to actually bring in Umzwandi Lembech, our political editor, just to give a brief overview of what actually happened this past week and in the months leading up to these polls. It's been a long journey. We've tried as the SABC to give every political party, small, big, independent candidates as well, airtime, and now the moment of truth has arrived.
It has indeed arrived, and the kinds of fights we're having, because we needed to reflect the voices of South Africans, and then we needed to provide that platform to South Africans to decide. It was difficult. Remember, we had 72 parties contesting plus 11 candidates. So, but then the independent candidates, I mean, then South Africans have then decided now it's going to be those parties that have been voted for, so they'll be on the board. So we'll see what exactly their offering was. So was it acceptable? Did people receive it? So if they received it, what did they decide? But of course, as we sit here, we know that the biggest loser in this instance was the governing party, dipping below 50%, not even below 50%, going right to 40%. So which means it can't form the government on its own. So we are in the coalition. And the emergence of, I would say, the splinter party, which is the MK, led by their former president. And then the Patriotic Alliance, those were some of the noticeable developments in this election. But of course, it would be interesting, Natasha, to see the seats here, how the allocation is done and how many parties will make it.
You know, you mentioned the issue of coalitions. We are going, into an uncharted terrain, right now. And I'm reminded about the conversations that we've had of remember there was that conference that was held by the Deputy President last year. And, we were just saying that rather push, or legislate coalitions. And you speak to various political party leaders, and, they have that moment to say, actually, I think we should have had legislated coalitions sooner or later.
There has been a lot of denial, particularly from the parties, because the local government sphere has actually shown us that South Africans somehow either split their vote or the votes are becoming more and more fragmented. So it's no longer a one-party dominant system. So the fact of the matter is that beyond this, they will have to speed up the process of legislating or regulating coalitions. Just imagine, Natasha, us having a president every 3 months because the parties in coalitions disagree and others are angry, they walk out, and then the government collapses. So we can't afford that. We are still a young democracy, relatively speaking, so our institutions, I'm not sure if they are at that stage where they can function. Like in Belgium, for example, I remember at some point, because they couldn't agree, they went for more than 12 months without a prime minister, but because the institutions are now established, it was easier. So I don't think we are there yet, so we are still in the building phase. So it is important to have a coalition that is legislated so that it is binding to everyone.